This week, we are reporting here on the lead up to Earth Day, and tonight, the alarming new report on the Colorado River. 40 million Americans depend on the water from that river.
And the Colorado River is at risk of running dry, and 40 million Americans are in danger of losing their water supply.
Today, the Colorado River is known as a drying waterway that is losing its fight against drought and demand. However, the newest discoveries buried beneath the riverbed tell a different story. They speak of a long-lost aquatic world, an ancient ocean filled with color, teeming with life and bursting with energy.
The drought-stricken Colorado River is in critical condition. Almost 2 years ago, the federal government declared the first ever shortage on the river, triggering cuts to water supplies in the Southwest.
What did this beautiful underwater world look like? And how does it change everything we believed about the Colorado River's past? Join us as we explore the wonderful world that puzzles scientists. The amazing discovery. May 2025 was an exciting time for researchers looking into finding out more about the fast-depleting Colorado River. These recent efforts were largely inspired by the writings and publications of Dr. Rebecca Dorsey, the lead researcher and professor at University of Oregon's Department of Earth Sciences. Her research on this alone includes over 4,000 citations and evidence pointing towards a long and rich history dating back over 60 million years. Now here comes the interesting part. Imagine yourself standing on a beach where Las Vegas is today. The waves are crashing against the sandy shores, while the fiercest sea monsters, like the frightening megalodon sharks and the massive plesiosaurus reptiles, can be seen swimming not too far away. What you just pictured in your mind isn't science fiction, but what the Colorado River region looked like over 50 million years ago. As the Colorado River depletes today, it shows evidence of the lost underwater world that existed long before the first river ever flowed on Earth. And while some scientists believe the Colorado River itself didn't appear until 5 to 6 million years ago, the ancient ocean that covered the entire southwest region of the United States is nothing like the desert landscape we are familiar with today. There is a reason scientists call this region the Colorado Seaway, despite how dry it looks. The ancient ocean stretched from southern California to central Utah. The Earth back then had a much warmer climate compared to what we experience today, and the ocean had a constant temperature of around 80 degrees Fahrenheit all year round. On the surface of this large seaway were hundreds of islands that made it look like a tropical paradise. The surprising thing about these islands is that these places surrounded by water would later become the highest peaks of the mountains we know today. The biggest islands back then became the Rocky Mountains, with some of the other islands ranging from being small enough for seabirds to lay nests to larger landforms as wide as modern-day Hawaii. Despite the ancient sea being as wide as it was, scientists discovered that the water was quite shallow in most places. Some ranged from 200 to 300 feet deep, and this meant sunlight could easily reach the bottom almost everywhere. As a result, sea life exploded with great activity, with massive forests of seaweed swaying all the time by powerful underwater currents. Swimming through these ancient waters were animals that would make today's ocean life look like a pet project. Perhaps the most frightening of these animals was the famous Mosasaurus, a giant marine lizard that lived in the deepest parts of the Colorado Seaway. It ate large sharks and other massive sea creatures that are considered apex predators today. Its features were so massive that many historians believe it is the massive sea monster known to the ancients as Leviathan. Another animal whose fossils were found by scientists as part of the Colorado Seaway was the plesiosaur. It was another marine reptile, but with a very long neck that made it look like a mythical sea serpent with a tiny head and a round body. But as strange as that might look, it doesn't come close to the next one we are about to show you. The last giant predatory fish that lived in this region was the Ziphanctus. This monster was hideous, looking like a living tarpon with huge fangs that swallowed its prey whole. We know this because most of the fossils found at these places today have smaller fish inside them. These living nightmares grew to over 20 feet long. Despite being the smallest marine predator mentioned so far, their biggest enemy most of the time was themselves. We have enough evidence today that shows the biggest cause of death for these creatures wasn't due to larger predators, natural old age, or even competition. Rather, most of them died while eating prey that was too big to swallow. Other strange creatures were the Hesperornis and the pterosaurs. Hesperornis was a bird that had no wings like a penguin, yet had the teeth of a crocodile. Pterosaurs were flying reptiles that dove into the waters to hunt for fish like seagulls.
Much like today's birds, pterosaurs ruled Earth's Mesozoic skies, adapting to many different habitats, while their dinosaur cousins roamed below.
These massive, cold-blooded birds were the size of large private jets, and their wingspans cast large shadows over the surface of the Colorado Seaway. But as terrifying as this might sound, one fish that didn't have to worry about it was the mighty megalodon. These fish were much larger and fiercer than the great white sharks we know today. They were large enough to bite a small ship in half. Its teeth were as big as your hand. Then we have the ammonites. No, not the powerful ancient armies from biblical history, but the fierce and massive animals from over 50 million years ago. Deeply related to the modern octopus we all know and love, most ammonites had 3 hearts. One pumped blood throughout the body, much like it does in humans, while the other 2 pumped blood to the ever-active gills to keep them alive. As for their blood, it was blue, not red as we are familiar with. This is because, unlike humans and most mammals with blood mostly colored by the red hemoglobin that contains iron, the blood of cephalopods, like the ammonites, is a pigment that contains copper. This substance naturally turns blue when oxygenated, unlike the iron in our blood that always turns red. These creatures lie in coiled shells, bigger than car tires, and jet through the water like rocket ships, but at just 10 miles an hour over short bursts. So yes, the Colorado Seaway was a very dangerous place to be. But besides being filled with dangerous animals ready to eat you, the Colorado Seaway was also one of the most beautiful places of the Jurassic period. The Seaway was also home to the big underwater settlements we know today as coral reefs. These marine homes are built by small fish called corals, and when they grow together over a long time, they form a colorful environment that looks like underwater cities. These beautiful places are what form the homes for starfish, turtles, and sharks today, and the Colorado Seaway was filled with these colorful environments. There is evidence that proves these ancient corals formed natural underwater settlements that stretched for miles. Some of these colorful formations grew so big that they created their islands just because they had become large enough to break the surface and became the landing spots for pterosaurs. The less interesting islands were lush forests of large ferns and the much larger ancestors of palm trees. The water sources that flowed into the seaway brought rich soil that supported these jungles right up to the edge and formed the beautiful homes of terrestrial giants like super crocodiles. Some once thought the massive Titanoboa lived in these islands as well, but that was dismissed by evidence showing that those massive snakes lived only in freshwater jungles. Aside from being the home for super crocodiles to drink and bask in the sunlight, these old beaches were dangerous for many other reasons. For one, these places experienced very extreme tides. Twice each day, these rushing tides, almost comparable to modern tsunamis, would rush in and out with massive force. These rides were so large that they left pools as large as soccer fields, and these large puddles would become the home of young sea creatures. These homes, sustained by the constant powerful tides, include billions of small clams, snails, and crabs, whose fossils were recently found in early March of this year. Stay till the end for the most exciting discovery yet, because you see, the latest research also points to hundreds of hot springs that were found scattered across the sea floor. These old springs formed the warm water oases where different kinds of life we have today possibly came from. We know this because most of the fossils found there are the ones that existed nowhere else on Earth. These discoveries include tube worms longer than a baseball bat, and single clams that can filter large entire swimming pools of water in less than a day.
Weather satellites are tracking water reserves in the drought-stricken West, and researchers at NASA and the University of California, Irvine say what they're finding is shocking. As Terry Okita reports, not only are reservoirs running low, but underground resources are depleting at an alarming rate.
The weather patterns experienced at these places were spectacular. Since there were no reliable mountain ranges back then, hurricanes were, most of the time, twice as strong as everything we've known and experienced today. The winds produced by these hurricanes were powerful enough to level entire forests, and the only thing that kept the ecosystem teeming with life was that the winds brought nutrients from the ocean up to the surface. The downside was that these winds also carried living organisms with them. Imagine flying in an aeroplane during this stormy season. Then you look out the window to see what the storm looks like, only for the plane to get crushed by the massive body of a megalodon. The peaceful night skies aren't so enticing either, as they were often filled with the horrifying loud cries of pterosaurs returning to their island homes. With so much happening at once, this was an excitingly dangerous time to be alive. But like every interesting time in history, this wild age was also coming to an end. Research shows that as millions of years passed, the underwater paradise began to change. The land slowly began to rise, moving up about 1 inch every 100 years. The islands grew bigger, and the mountain tops we know today slowly began to emerge. The connection to the open ocean slowly became narrower, making the water even saltier than it once was due to rapid evaporation. By 4000 BC, the tiniest islands had grown larger, and the Colorado Seaway had changed from one massive body of water to a group of smaller salt lakes. Then, as the centuries passed, these smaller salt lakes became smaller freshwater lakes, and later became the river system we know today. This reduction happened at an exponential speed, and we know this because of how fast the river is depleting today, especially when we add other factors like human use and climate change. Today, it looks like an average water body, but that was not the case 60 million years ago. Now let's examine the evidence alone, how research confirms this. When it was fully confirmed that there was an ancient ocean covering the Colorado River region, many wondered what made the scientists so sure about this. Sure, there is clear fossil evidence that certain types of aquatic and terrestrial animals lived in those areas, but that alone isn't proof enough that there was a great ocean covering that entire area. Besides, it wouldn't be the first time scientists were wrong about history. However, the big answer lies in an incredible story of discovery that took years and various teams of researchers to decide. The recent breakthrough only came after experts from various teams put the pieces together and provided the rock-solid proof that silenced all skepticism. The most compelling evidence came from a special type of fossil. These small yet enduring relics of the past are called foraminifera. They are built for living in only specific types of water and have survived as a race for hundreds of millions of years. They are like the planktons of the ancient world, and the ones that thrived the most in the oceans are quite different from the ones that survived in the lakes, just like how a goldfish today is much different from a shark. When scientists examined rock samples below the Colorado River with powerful microscopes, they found something unbelievable. We are talking about billions of these fossils packed into every handful of sediment dissected and examined across various labs in America. The analysis done at the University of Colorado reveals something even more interesting. It was that these fossils weren't just randomly scattered through the rock, but were arranged in perfect layers that matched the rhythm of modern tides, but on a much grander scale. It was at this point that the clues slowly began to unravel. The high tide fossils contained different species than the ones at the lower tides, creating a natural calendar written in ancient stones.
Right now, the Denver Museum of Nature and Science is discussing a major find east of Colorado Springs. This is a huge field of fossils that explains what happened after the asteroid killed the dinosaurs.
It was so obvious that scientists could count the ancient days and make a close estimate based on how the fossil layers stacked up. and it just so happened that these tides rose and fell over millions of years. But microscope fossils are just the tip of the iceberg. Various drilling teams have pulled up huge chunks of rock containing perfectly preserved seashells. Some of these rocks have strong traces of their original colors back when hundreds of reefs decorated the floors of this mysterious ocean that was yet to be discovered. These weren't average freshwater clams you might be able to find across various lakes today. The ones found and examined by scientists that led them to their recent conclusions are special types of fossil shells called ridges. They are massive shells that grew in ancient coral reefs. Some of them are bigger than luxurious dinner plates and have very thick walls that are heavier than most rocks half the size. And as most marine biologists would tell you, these structures can only develop in salty ocean water. What sealed the case for most scientists was that there were layers of pure salt buried hundreds of feet underground across various places, spanning the entire region that would later become known as the Colorado Seaway. Of course, this isn't regular table salt, but very complex deposits of minerals that only form naturally when ocean water evaporates in shallow tropical seas today. Most of these modern clues to the past are sometimes 20 feet thick and stretch for hundreds of miles underground, showing that there was an ancient ocean housing fossils from millions of years ago that dried up and naturally left its traces behind. We know it was an ocean because no lake or river can ever produce salt deposits so massive. As we shall see, rock formations tell an even more detailed story. Modern scientists have found massive underwater dunes that are preserved in solid stone, giving clues to how the oldest ocean currents moved across the sea floor. These petrified dunes show the same ripple patterns found today at any beach, but frozen in time and buried deep underground. Better yet, these ripples show specific directions flowing from west to east. This direction matches the best AI models we have, which demonstrate how water would have most likely moved through the ancient Colorado Seaway based on all the previous evidence. Now let's examine the chemical analysis. This method of investigating the past shows another layer of proof that is impossible to fake. As we know, most ocean waters contain very specific ratios of unique elements like strontium, calcium, and magnesium, different from fresh water. Various researchers at MIT have used special tools called mass spectrometers to study individual mineral crystals from the buried layers of sediments. Each of them shows the exact chemical signature of seawater with isotope ratios that come from creatures that were born and spent the rest of their lives in salty conditions. Much better evidence comes from the rarest of the fossils found across these places called bioturbation structures. These burrow systems are created by ancient sea worms, clams, and crabs burrowing through the ocean floor each time they look for food. Discoveries from last year show these networks of dig hotels reaching 15 feet into the sediment, with thousands, if not millions, of these dug by living creatures from a long time ago. They all form a maze that matches exactly what marine biologists find in modern oceans. Freshwater animals simply don't create burrow systems this unique. Thanks to modern evidence, experts can tell how salty these ancient places were by studying the shells of microscopic creatures called ostracods. These animals build their shells differently depending on how salty the water they live in is, making them the natural tools we use to measure how salty their environment is.
Back now with the alarming news about a critical water lifeline for the western U.S. A new study finding the Colorado River Basin has lost trillions of gallons over the years as temperatures rise.
Based on this, we've determined that the Colorado Seaway has salt levels that are almost identical to today's Pacific, making it true seawater and not just a giant lake with a bit of salt. But here comes the part that blows the minds of scientists. Thanks to modern technology, we now have a different kind of evidence that points to what the Colorado Seaway looked like 50 million years ago. You see, various sediment layers formed on the ancient ocean floor, and tiny iron particles have aligned themselves with the Earth's magnetic field. That's right. These sediment layers now behave like tiny compasses pointing north. But there is a catch. Earth's magnetic field flips direction every few 100,000 years. However, this too can be easily read through the rock layers like pages from a history book. These magnetic patterns buried under the Colorado River specifically come very close to the sediment patterns from the same period. They can be found across various deep-sea drilling cores around the world today. We now see how ancient history becomes clear when we study modern environments and compare them to relics of the past. A recent expedition to the Bahamas, for example, found living proof of the same thing based on fossil evidence. The fossils found there gave perfect clues on what the ancient environment looked like based on how natural processes operate today. They did this simply by watching how modern animals build the same types of burrows with the exact patterns found in fossils. All the evidence shows a very strong case that even the most doubtful scientists were forced to accept. The combination of fossils, the unique chemistry of materials found in the area, and the magnetic patterns found all over the place tells the same story from different angles. There was indeed an ancient ocean that covered the American Southwest, and more proof is written in stone, waiting for scientists to build the right tools for deciding its mysteries. Is the Colorado Seaway as real as scientists make it out to be, or is this another case of being wrong about evolutionary history? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.